KCBS AM/FM traffic from the traffic leader, KCBS. KCBS Bay Area forecast. We're looking at partly to mostly cloudy skies this morning. Once that burns back, we're going to have lots of sunshine throughout the Bay Area. There are warnings about possible sneaker waves at the coast, though, so be aware of that if your destination is the coast this morning. And highs will range from the mid to upper 60s along the coast and at the bay to the inland highs of mid to upper 70s. So, yeah, don't be surprised you see some clouds out there to start this morning. Even some fog out there in spots, but it's going to burn back and leave behind just a gorgeous day. Traffic and weather together on the 8th on KCBS.
We're all on this planet together. So join Odyssey and find your one thing. Now that it's autumn, check window and door seals for proper insulation and replace your furnace air filter. Join Odyssey, and together, each of us doing one thing makes a greener tomorrow. What's your one thing?
Real talk, kids are gonna kid. And sometimes that can look messier, ickier, and stickier than we'd like to admit. We can't always protect our kids from chewing on borrowed pencils, sharing lip gloss, or mild sneezes. But there is one thing we can protect them from, and that's COVID-19. Keep your family safer with vaccines and boosters. Find one near you at myturn.ca.gov. Brought to you by the California Department of Public Health.
1-800-GOT-JUNK is your friend with the truck.
We make junk disappear.
All you have to do is point.
News that matters to you. Around the Bay, around the world, around the clock. All news 106.9 and AM 740 KCBS.
Sunday, October 30th, 2022. I'm Eric Thomas. Coming up, KCBS In Depth.
You're listening to KCBS In Depth.
Really, in order to find quality care, you often have to be on a wait list that's months long.
The people, places, and issues the Bay Area is talking about.
The aggressive advocates who were looking to overrule Roe for so long, they really had no idea of the consequences they might be opening up.
In this case, there very well may be charges that are appropriate. For example, trying to obstruct the official proceeding of Congress, right? That is unlawful.
This is KCBS In Depth.
The tiny microchip. It's a wonder of modern technology, powering everything from our smartphones to our cars to our washing machines. They've become so commonplace that many of us don't even notice how much of our daily routine depends on them. But if you did pause for a moment and traced out the journey that it took for all those chips to make it into just one of your devices, you would uncover a manufacturing process of breathtaking complexity that spans the globe. Welcome to KCBS In Depth, broadcasting throughout the Bay Area and streaming on the Odyssey app. I'm Keith Manconi. The global supply of silicon has some high stakes to it, and it's sparking some major friction. Earlier this month, the U.S. imposed sweeping new import controls that aim to slow China's development of high-end semiconductors. It's a dramatic escalation in the race between these two global superpowers for chip supremacy, and it could have far-reaching consequences for both the global economy and the balance of power across the Pacific. Now, these might sound like overstuffed claims for a dispute over computer chips, but today on the program, our guest is going to get us all up to speed on why the humble transistor is playing an outsized role in shaping world events. That would be Chris Miller, a professor of history at Tufts University and the author of the very well-timed book, Chip War, The Fight for the World's Most Critical Technology. Chris Miller, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So in some ways, this might be a bit of a surprising topic. I mean, computer chips are so commonplace that it can be hard to believe that we could ever run out. That's actually kind of what I was thinking when we started to hear that car manufacturers were having to cut back during the pandemic simply because they couldn't get their hands on enough chips. I was thinking, we make so many of these things, can't we just make a few more? Obviously, I'm not a hardware person, but what your book reveals is that when it comes to the modern chip, packing so many transistors onto such a tiny piece of silicon is a feat that very nearly takes the entire globe to pull off. So you can indeed have supply hiccups, and when you do, there are some big consequences. And actually, let's start with that piece of the puzzle. Before we get to U.S.-China ties, give us a sense of just how much of our modern world relies on semiconductors.
Well, we often think of semiconductors or computer chips as they're more commonly known as being inside of computers or in smartphones, but in fact, as computing power has spread across the economy, all sorts of devices today rely on chips, whether it's appliances like dishwashers or microwaves, or cars, which often have dozens or in some cases even hundreds of chips inside. Almost every device with an on-off switch today has some sort of chip inside, and our economy and our society simply can't function without them.
Right, and we have seen some very vivid illustrations of other applications as well. We can also talk about the military applications and the trouble that Russia is running into currently with some of its missiles and other military hardware that are getting difficult to deploy because they can't get their hands on enough chips.
That's right. Today, most chips go into civilian uses, but around 2% of chips and many of the most advanced chips end up in military use cases. And if you think of what it takes to guide a missile over many hundreds of miles to hit a target precisely, that's a lot of computing power that it needs, and that's advanced chips that need to be in the nose of that missile inside of its guidance computer. And Russia is one of many countries that can't make the most advanced chips at home, so it has to either buy them or otherwise acquire them from abroad. And as Russia's faced more and more difficulties because of Western sanctions in acquiring chips, it's had to smuggle them in from third parties and faces increasing difficulties in doing so.
And the metaphor that some folks are using to explain the importance and the centrality of computer chips in the global economy, some people are comparing it to oil at this point, and drawing that comparison both for oil's scarcity and for the fact that, you know, whoever controls crucial choke points in that supply has a great deal of power and influence over the global economy and even global politics. Do you think that that's an apt comparison?
I think it is, and one of the striking things about the chip industry is that it's even more concentrated in terms of its production than oil is, and that's one of the reasons why I called the book Chip War, is that there's really a battle for control of these critical choke points. And to give you an example of what I mean, in the oil industry, Saudi Arabia, which is one of the world's biggest oil producers, only pumps 10 to 15% of the world's oil supply. By contrast, Taiwan produces 90% of the world's most advanced microprocessors, and the Dutch company ASML produces 100% of a certain type of machine tool without which you can't make advanced chips. And when you look across the supply chain of chemicals, machines, software that's needed to make advanced chips, you find that often one or two companies control the entirety of a market for the most advanced technology, which creates these choke points that are very difficult for other countries and companies to get around.
I really think that that's a point worth flagging again. So we're talking about this technology that undergirds basically everything that we're using on a day-to-day basis, and you're saying one company in the entire planet is producing this crucial technology that is, you know, you can't make modern chips without this technology. So really we're talking about a one company choke point for something that of global importance.
Well, one of the challenges with making advanced chips is that it's extraordinarily hard to do and extraordinarily expensive. So if you want to make an advanced chip making facility, it'll cost $20 billion or so. So you need immense scale to do this in an economically efficient way, and that's produced the type of market dynamics where you've just got one or two firms in the position that they're in atop each segment of the market. There's just no other way to do it given the amount of investment and capital expenditure involved. And so that's been a very efficient way to structure the industry, but it also does raise the risk of vulnerability if in case any part of the supply chain faces disruption.
All right, well, a lot more to talk about, but I'm going to reintroduce you again real quick. You're listening to KCBS In Depth, your weekly deep dive into the events and trends shaping life in the Bay Area and beyond. I'm Keith Menconi. Today in the program, we're discussing the immensely complicated global supply chain to make the computer chips in your smartphone, and why global superpowers are fighting to make sure that they have a piece of the action. Our guest is Chris Miller, a professor of history at Tufts University, also a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. His new book is Chip War, the fight for the world's most critical technology. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier, the timing could not be better for the release of this book. It came out towards the beginning of October, and just a few days later, we heard the announcement from the Biden administration of new export controls on a range of technologies and even touching on to human capital as well, all aimed at